everyone, this is PKO Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to talk about Thor Love and Thunder and give some overall thoughts about how good or bad it may be and whether it will be another big success for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now there may be spoilers throughout this video for all of the Thor movies and other movies within the MCU and also the Disney Plus shows as well, so just beware when going into this overall video. Now as we all know, Thor Love and Thunder is the fourth film overall within the Thor franchise, and it will be overall the 29th movie within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it will be the second Marvel movie of 2022 following Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Thor Love and Thunder is due for release on July 8th, 2022. Now in terms of the franchise, the four films have really been a mixed bag in both tone and quality. There seems to be an ongoing struggle from Marvel to really get to grips in terms of the character and what direction best to take it going forward. Now for me, the first film released in 2011 remains the best in terms of being the most consistent in its tone and story. The sequel, For the Dark World, was actually quite good in its first half when it focused on Asgard before descending into comedy for the second half. Now Thor Ragnarok was Marvel's intent to really make a truly epic Thor adventure that the character deserved, but they made the big mistake of adapting a very cartoonish comedic tone similar to what we saw within the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and whilst it had very nice visuals and was pleasing to look at, it really robbed the character of any gravitas or dramatic weight and awe and wonder that we certainly saw with the character later on in Avengers Infinity War. And for me and for a lot of people, it definitely underutilised the huge potential that we should have got with a Ragnarok storyline. But despite that, Thor Ragnarok was a massive success in 2017, grossing over 854 million worldwide, so it comes as no surprise that Marvel would seemingly continue in the same comedic direction, with director Taika Waititi returning alongside Tessa Thompson reprising her role as Valkyrie from the third film as well. This direction is emphasised even more so with the Guardians of the Galaxy themselves making an appearance, and all eyebrows were raised even further when it was confirmed that Natalie Portman, who played Jane Foster in the first two films, would be returning and that they would be adapting the Lady Thor storyline from the comics, which sees Jane take a Mjolnir and the powers of Thor while suffering from cancer. Now further interest was gained when acclaimed actor Christian Bale was added to the cast to play the villain Gorr the God Butcher, an alien being who wants to take out all of the gods within the universe. So with all of that being mentioned, I have to say in the lead up to Thor Love and Thunder, I'm not as hyped up for this installment, and following the recent teaser trailer that was released, it's kind of compounded my own concerns that this fourth installment will very much go in the same way that we saw with Thor Ragnarok. Now on the plus side, in terms of the trailer, it looked every bit as bright and colourful as the third film. We had some very good visual shots where we saw Thor and Korg looking at the ruins of a huge beast. Again, I think that's taken very much from the panels of the comic book. I did like some of the shots where it seems that we will be visiting the city of Olympus, where we see the shot here. A lot of the buildings are built on the rocks and the ruins, so it's very striking, very bright and colourful. We did get another great shot here where we see a festival of lights being shined within the Olympus city, and we also see a back shot here, it seems, of Russell Crowe, who will be making a cameo appearance as Zeus. So how exactly Olympus and Zeus plays into this overall story, I'm not quite so sure, but we'll find out when we get to see the movie. So throughout this trailer, we definitely got those bright, colourful vibes. We had the rendition of the classic Guns N' Roses song Sweet Child of Mine, which I remember of course playing all throughout the 90s. We get some references in terms of where Thor has been post the events of Endgame. If you remember, he fell into a bout of depression following the events of Infinity War, and we saw the Fat Thor version before he got himself together to take on the battle alongside the other Avengers against Thanos in the final climax. And we're taking a continuation from that storyline here, where it seems very much that Thor is going on a voyage of self-discovery, still trying to define who he is. We get the earlier shots of the Fat Thor version, very much doing the chain pulls, CrossFit style amongst the ruin of a monster here, but thankfully when we see later shots of the trailer, we see Thor regaining his poise and his physical stature. In the earlier scenes that we see here with the Guardians of the Galaxy, where he's wearing his typical 80s style outfit, reminded me a bit of the similar outfit that we saw with Kurt Russell in Big Trouble in Little China, and we get some narration here where Thor is reflecting on his life and that he's retiring from superhero duties, and I think this is somewhat of a disappointing turn given everything that we've experienced with the character all throughout the MCU. For me personally, I'd want to see Thor really taking charge with a far more stronger defined purpose and direction. We have another scene here where we see him burying the Stormbreaker weapon, by a grave, it seems, and then we later on see him on the boat with a pirate lady, and another shot here where he's sitting on the boat in the updated costume that we've seen from the toy line as well. So this very much seems like we're going to have some sort of arc where Thor is just traveling around, not really knowing what to do with himself. He's partying around, sleeping with women, really kind of just drifting away before obviously certain events call him back into action. So again, on the positive side, it does seem that Chris Hemsworth would again get lots of range to exhibit a lot of comedic and charismatic personalities. That was probably one of the best things about Thor Ragnarok, is that Thor was very much of a brighter presence than what we saw in the previous 2 entries. And I suppose it's also good that we won't be getting fat Thor throughout the whole movie. That's something I really hated, and I think a lot of fans hated as well. This whole idea that Thor would just descend into becoming overweight. I always had much more confidence and conviction in the character that he would really take charge when the going got tough. So I'm glad that we will see some sort of regaining of form and confidence throughout the character. We do get scenes, as I mentioned before, with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, I'm not quite sure how they're involved or really why they're involved. It kind of seems that they'll just be there for a short part of the movie before going ahead to their further adventures. Their involvement here, for me, really seems like it's more to just provide setup for their own 3rd movie, which I believe is still set for release in 2023. But again, we'll find out more when we see the overall film itself. We get another scene where we see King Valkyrie. Again, I'm not sure why it's King Valkyrie. Why can't I just call her Queen Valkyrie? I'm not sure why, but we see her here based in the new Asgard, being on Norway. Again, that was something else I wasn't very convinced by when we saw in Avengers Endgame. And it's here that she's taking part in some sort of political conference or meeting, looking very bored at the chair. And in terms of her outfit, she looked very similar to how Tessa Thompson was in Men in Black International, if you remember, where she starred alongside Chris Hemsworth as well. So we assume again she'll have a prominent role as to what we saw both in Thor Ragnarok. Now, it's been hinted by Kevin Feige that we will indeed get far more references into her LGBTQ representation. Now, I don't really care about that in terms of whether she's a lesbian or not. I just want to see her be far more of a stronger character and a presence, but at the same time not take the spotlight too much away from Thor. We then of course go on to the final shot of this trailer, where we see the first reveal of Natalie Portman in the Thor costume. Now, many did comment where we saw the first reveal of Natalie Portman returning in the San Diego Comic-Con event a couple of years ago, how the fact that when she was holding the hammer that was presented to her, that the hammer was almost as big as her in many ways, because Natalie Portman, as we all know, is a very slender and slight physique. And if you go by the comic book source material, the Lady Thor character is far more of a muscular toned figure and form. So everybody was curious to see how exactly Natalie would fit in terms of the Thor costume. But I do have to say that this shot here, I think she looks quite good. I think they've done a good job in accurately reflecting the comic book source material. That's something that you have to credit Marvel. They always do try and stay close to the connections of the comic books. And I like this shot here where she's holding Mjolnir. Now, obviously the big question is, how exactly does she obtain the use of Mjolnir? If you remember at the events of Endgame, they had to go back in time to recapture Mjolnir after it was destroyed by Hela in Thor Ragnarok. And then once we saw Captain America wield the Mjolnir, he then took it back to where it originally came from. So they're going to have to do a bit of explaining here how exactly Jane does come across the Mjolnir weapon. Will it be Jane Foster from a previous time and somehow she's found herself trapped in the current universe here? Will Thor have to go to some sort of alternate reality, and that's when he comes across Jane and that's how she obtains Mjolnir? And how much will they riff off the cancer storyline? Because you'd like to think that that's something that shouldn't really be played for laughs, that should have quite some substance and weight to it. Again, rebuilding on the relationship between both Thor and Jane Foster. So you'd think logically dealing with the cancer part of the story arc would take up some time and would probably be far more of a serious tone as to what we see within the rest of this trailer. So we'll be interested to see how involved Jane Foster is. Will she end up with the Thor powers permanently? Will she end up taking over the franchise from Chris Hemsworth? Because as we've seen with a lot of the original Avengers, they have departed in some form or capacity. Of course, we've seen the likes of Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson all leave the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We know that the current CEO of Disney, Bob Chapek, has made several intentions that they will be reducing these highly paid contracts for these actors. And Chris Hemsworth, being one of the OG Avengers, is still a very expensive acquisition. I do believe he was paid around 20 million for this fourth installment. So going forward, I don't think we'll see similar salary payments going ahead. So will this indeed be the last installment for Chris Hemsworth. I suppose that will be determined by the overall box office success of this installment. And of course, you'd like to think that they wouldn't get Natalie Portman back for just one installment. They'd want to see her continue in several films and involvement within the MCU, and of course her involvement once again emphasises the push in forwarding more female characters within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So we'll wait and see overall how much of a role she's got to play and how much it will affect the overall involvement of Chris Hemsworth's Thor overall. So in terms of the project, I do think that Thor Love and Thunder will be another great box office success, as many who loved the third film will like the tone and direction of this fourth installment and will rush to see it when it debuts. But for more fans like myself who wanted to see a far more epic and grandiose tale, not necessarily dark and deconstructive, but just far more substantial in terms of its story, maybe we will be equally disappointed again at the continued comedic tone. Taika Waititi has referenced several times on social media that he is going to double down on what worked within Thor Ragnarok. So the last question overall is, will Thor Love and Thunder end up being the best or the worst overall in terms of the Thor franchise? In my opinion, it's probably going to be the worst, or at least the joint worst in terms of Thor Ragnarok. As I stated before, I believe that is the weakest of the four films, and it definitely seems that Thor Love and Thunder will be on the same par as well. They did hold off on showing the involvement of Christian Bale as Gore the Butcher, but I'm sure we'll see far more reveals in the second trailer. But with only 3 months to go before its release, it does seem that Marvel is very confident in Thor Love and Thunder, and to be fair, that confidence does certainly have some justification, as the Thor franchise has been very successful. All previous 3 films were big hits at the box office, and Chris Hemsworth has continued to be very popular amongst fans in general as an actor, but especially in his performance as Thor, so there's certainly no reason from a commercial standpoint that Thor Love and Thunder will be an overall success. But in my personal opinion, I'm just a bit concerned in terms of the overall story, and with all of the massive elements going on within the film, I just fear that it may be a bit of a mess and it might actually be one of the worst films within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But we'll wait and see overall. Hopefully the second trailer, when it's released, will convince me a lot more in terms of this overall project. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on Thor Love and Thunder, whether it will be a big success for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and whether it will actually be the best or indeed the worst within the Thor franchise films. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you convinced by this? Were you a fan of Ragnarok and are very pleased at what you've seen within the teaser trailer? Or are you like me, that you wanted far more of a serious, much more of an imposing story within the Thor franchise that's deserving of the character? Do you think there's been some regression within the character? As for me personally, I think the character was best displayed in Avengers Infinity War, and have we taken certain backward steps in his personality going forward? Let me know what you think in the comments as well. And of course, when we indeed get the second trailer, I will provide further coverage within the channel, so look out for those as well. And as usual, when the film does release, you'll see also non-spoiler and spoiler reviews surrounding the movie, as well as assessment of its box office. So all of that coverage is due to come on the channel as well. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.